Performer. Chapter 8. The Pokémon Performer style. The contest hall buzzed with energy. A chaotic symphony of excited chatter, rustling programs and the occasional burst of applause as the announcer hyped up the next performer. Rows upon rows of spectators filled the stadium, their faces glowing under the bright, sweeping spotlights. The polished stage gleamed under the dazzling lights, every corner of it framed with glittering decorations and banners that screamed showtime. Behind the curtain, Ash paced like a torchic in a thunderstorm, his heeled boots clicking against the tiled floor with every nervous step. He tugged at the hem of May's orange top for what had to be the 50th time, his fingers twitching with a mix of anxiety and regret. "This is insane," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the roar of the audience. "What was I thinking? I can't do this. There's no way I can pull this off." "Relax," Brock said, stepping closer to adjust the red bandana tied around Ash's head. "Again. You've been practicing non-stop for days, Ash. You've got this. Just remember everything we worked on." "That's easy for you to say," Ash shot back, gesturing to himself dramatically. "You're not the one dressed like this." Brock didn't bother hiding his smirk. "No, but you're pulling it off better than I expected." "Gee, thanks," Ash muttered, glaring at him before resuming his pacing. His boots wobbled slightly with every step, and he let out a frustrated sigh. How does May not break an ankle in these things? They're like walking on stilts. "Careful," Max piped up from his relaxed perch against the wall, arms crossed and a smug grin plastered across his face. "If you trip out there, I'm recording it." Could go viral. Petalburg's clumsiest coordinator. "I'll do." Ash stopped pacing long enough to shoot him a look that could have turned a glalie into a puddle. "Wow, Max. Thanks. That's really helping my confidence." Max shrugged, unfazed. "Hey, I'm just saying. Don't fall on your face during the spin, and you'll be golden." "Max," Brock said warningly, though there was a hint of amusement in his tone. Ash groaned, tugging again at his outfit. "Tell me again why May couldn't wear something I don't know, less flashy." "Because coordinators aren't just trainers," Brock explained patiently, like a teacher reciting a well-rehearsed lesson. "They're performers. The outfits, the moves, the personality, it's all part of the show. You're not just battling, you're entertaining." "Easy for you to say," Ash muttered, glancing down at the short blue skirt and those cursed boots. "You're not the one who looks like they lost a bet." Pikachu, perched cheerfully on a nearby crate, let out an encouraging Pika-Pie, as if to say, "You've got this." Ash managed a small smile at his partner. "At least someone believes in me." Brock gave Ash a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "You've got this, Ash. Just remember, channel May's energy, keep your moves sharp, smile like you're having the time of your life, and don't fall on his face," Max added helpfully. Ash clenched his jaw, biting back a retort. Instead, he took a deep breath, trying to steady the storm of nerves swirling in his chest. He glanced down at the Pokeball in his hand, its smooth surface glinting under the backstage lights. Inside was May's beautifully, the star of this whole performance. "I can do this," he told himself firmly. "I have to. For May." "Next up, we have May from Petalburg City." The announcer's voice boomed through the stadium, amplified by the arena's sound system. Ash's stomach did a somersault. "That's you," Max said, clapping him on the back with far more force than necessary. "Break a leg. Or don't. That'd be bad." "Max. Go." Brock snapped, his tone sharper this time. Ash shot Max one last glare before closing his eyes, taking another deep breath. "All right," he muttered under his breath. "Here goes nothing." The red curtain began to part, its heavy fabric sliding away to reveal the blindingly bright stage lights. For a moment, Ash froze, squinting as the brightness hit him like a hyper beam. The roaring cheers of the crowd surged toward him in a tidal wave, loud enough to make his pulse race even faster. Smile, he reminded himself, plastering on his best attempt at May's cheerful grin. He raised a hand and gave the audience a bubbly wave, just like he'd practiced. "Hi, everyone," he called out, his voice bright and high-pitched in a passable imitation of May's cheerfulness. "I'm May, and I'm here to dazzle you today." The crowd responded with a burst of applause, their cheers growing louder. Ash felt a flicker of confidence amidst the chaos. "Okay," he thought, stepping forward onto the stage, his heeled boots clicking against the polished floor. "So far, so good. Just don't trip. Don't wobble. Don't mess this up." Beautifully's Pokeball felt warm in his hand, almost as if it was reassuring him. He pressed the button, releasing the Pokémon in a swirl of light. Beautifully appeared in midair, its shimmering wings catching the spotlight like a kaleidoscope of glitter. The crowd gasped in awe, and Ash felt his chest swell with pride. "All right, Beautifully," he said, his voice ringing with more confidence than he actually felt. "Let's show them what we've got." From the corner of his vision, he caught Brock giving him a small approving nod. Max, meanwhile, was still smirking, but there was something almost impressed in his expression. The music swelled, signaling the start of the routine. Ash took another deep breath, forcing himself to focus. His hands felt sweaty, his heart was still racing, and his legs were already threatening mutiny in those ridiculous boots. But as Beautifully twirled gracefully in front of him, its movements perfectly in sync with the music, Ash realized something important. "It's not about me. Meow." The crowd wasn't here to see Ash Ketchum. They were here to see May, or at least the best version of May he could pretend to be. With that thought in mind, he pushed through the nerves, letting May's practiced routine guide him. The spotlight was on him now, and he wasn't about to let it go to waste. The music burst to life, a lively and energetic tune that filled the contest hall with excitement. The bassline thrummed in Ash's chest, matching the rapid beat of his heart as he stepped into position at the center of the stage. His boots clicked against the polished floor, a sound that somehow felt both powerful and precarious. "All right, stay calm. Just like you practiced. No falling, no tripping, and definitely no faceplants." He forced himself to smile. May's signature smile, bright and confident, the kind that said, "I've totally got this," even if every nerve in his body screamed otherwise. The crowd was a blur of faces beyond the stage lights, their murmur of anticipation blending into a low hum. "All right, Beautifully," Ash called out, his voice carrying over the music. He tossed the Pokeball high into the air, the motion smooth and practiced. "Let's show them what we've got." The Pokeball burst open in a swirl of sparkles, the dazzling display eliciting a collective gasp from the audience. Beautifully emerged in a flash of light, its delicate iridescent wings catching the spotlights as it fluttered gracefully above the stage. Ash felt a surge of pride as the crowd oohed and ahayed at the sight. "Okay, good start. They like it. Just don't mess up now. Let's start with Silver Wind," he commanded, his voice steady despite the nerves clawing at his stomach. Beautifully chirped in acknowledgement, flapping its elegant wings to release a shimmering gust of wind. The sparkling ribbon of air danced across the stage, catching the light in a way that made it look almost magical. Ash took a deep breath and stepped forward, trying to match the rhythm of the music with his movements. He twirled, just like he'd practiced, his skirt flaring slightly around him as he spun. For one horrifying moment, he felt his ankle wobble in the heeled boots, but he quickly steadied himself, his forced smile never wavering. "Ooh," he muttered under his breath, his heart hammering. "Okay, no one noticed. Keep going." From somewhere backstage, Max's voice floated into his mind, mocking as ever. "Don't fall on your face, Ash. Now, Beautifully, follow up with String Shot," he called out, pushing the thought of Max aside before it could throw off his focus. Beautifully chirped again, shooting a silky thread from its mouth. The shimmering strand of silk spiraled into the air, forming a delicate, glowing helix above the stage. Ash moved in sync with it, spinning as he raised his arms in a dramatic flourish. The crowd erupted into cheers, their excitement washing over him like a wave. For the first time since stepping on stage, Ash felt a thrill of exhilaration. "They're loving it. I'm actually pulling this off." "All right, beautifully," Ash said, his voice rising with a burst of confidence. "Let's finish with tackle. Make it flashy." Beautifully darted into action, soaring high before diving into a graceful loop. Its wings caught the light with every turn, leaving trails of glittering brilliance in its wake. The Pokémon completed the move with a final flourish, landing gently on Ash's outstretched arm. The music hit its final note as Ash struck a pose, his free hand resting on his hip, one foot turned slightly to the side in what he hoped was a confident stance. He flashed the crowd a dazzling smile, May's smile, and held his breath. For a moment, the hall was silent, except for the faint hum of the spotlights. Then, the audience erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the space like a thunderous wave. Ash's chest swelled with pride as he glanced at Beautifully, who chirped happily in response. He could feel the heat of the lights on his face, but for once, he didn't mind. "I can't believe I just did that," Ash whispered to himself, his voice barely audible over the roar of the crowd. His heart was still pounding, but now it wasn't just from nerves. It was from the sheer adrenaline of pulling off a performance he never thought he could manage. Backstage, he caught a glimpse of Brock and Max peeking around the curtain. Brock gave him a thumbs up, his face beaming with pride, while Max, arms crossed, wore a grudgingly impressed expression. "Not bad," Ash muttered under his breath, his grin widening slightly. "Not bad at all." Beautifully flapped its wings, sending a small puff of glitter into the air as if to celebrate their victory. Ash gave it a quick pat on the head, his earlier nerves now replaced by a growing sense of accomplishment. As the announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, signaling the next contestant, Ash turned and strutted off stage, his heeled boots clicking confidently against the floor. For the first time since this whole crazy plan began, he felt like he might actually have a shot at pulling it off. "Well," he said quietly to Beautifully as they stepped behind the curtain, "that wasn't a total disaster." The Pokémon chirped in agreement, and Ash couldn't help but laugh. Backstage, Ash slumped against the wall, his legs trembling like a newborn ponyta learning to walk. He let out a long breath, still trying to wrap his head around the fact that he had just pulled off an entire performance without face-planting. Or worse. His heart was still hammering in his chest, the adrenaline refusing to leave his system. Brock approached him, holding out a bottle of water like an approving coach after a big game. "You did great out there," he said, his tone calm but genuinely proud. He patted Ash on the shoulder. All that practice paid off. Ash accepted the bottle with a small, shaky smile, twisting the cap off with sweaty hands. "Thanks," he muttered, taking a long sip. The cold water hit his throat like a blessing. "I can't believe I didn't mess that up. I was sure I was going to trip on those stupid boots at least twice." Max, who was already glued to the nearby monitor, didn't even look up. "Yeah, well," he said, his tone as smug as ever, "you didn't fall, so I guess that's a win. For you, anyway." Ash shot him a sidelong glare. "Wow, Max. Your support is overwhelming." Max smirked, crossing his arms. "Hey, I'm just saying, you didn't embarrass yourself too badly. For you, that's basically a miracle." "Knock it off, Max," Brock interjected before Ash could retort. "He did great, and you know it." Max shrugged but didn't argue, which for Max was about as close to a compliment as Ash figured he'd get. Before Ash could bask in the semi-praise, the announcer's voice boomed over the speakers, cutting through the backstage chatter like a razor leaf. "And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. Let's see how our coordinators scored." Ash froze mid-sip, nearly choking on his water. He swallowed hard, his stomach twisting into a knot that felt roughly the size of a Snorlax. He quickly moved to stand beside Brock and Max, his eyes locked on the screen displaying the judges' scores. The numbers for each contestant appeared one by one, their names flashing alongside their scores in bold, glowing text. The other coordinators had done well, really well, and with each passing number, Ash's nerves climbed higher. "Ugh, I'm going to puke," Ash muttered, clutching the water bottle like it was a lifeline. "Don't puke," Max said flatly, not bothering to look away from the screen. "If you're going to throw up, at least wait until we're back at the Pokémon Center." "I'm not cleaning that up." "Max," Brock said with a sigh, shaking his head. Finally, the screen lit up with May's name. Well, Ash's name for the day. His stomach did a flip as the scores appeared in bold, glowing text. 9.6, 9. Victiwell, Yishael, Nadat Samamanand Ka. 8, 9. Bissail, Baptisale. 7, 9. Adele. Ilin. 5, 9. Adele. Aidindal, Aid. The numbers seemed to hover in the air for a moment, and Ash stared at them, his brain struggling to process what he was seeing. Max let out a low whistle, his eyebrows shooting up. "Wow, that's actually really good. Like, ridiculously good." Ash blinked, his mouth opening and closing as his brain tried to work through the math, or at least the implications. "Wait, does that mean I won?" Brock nodded, his smile warm and proud. "It does. Congratulations, Ash. Or should I say, May?" Ash saw your drop. "I won." For a moment, he couldn't believe it. All the nerves, the awkwardness, the endless rehearsals. It had actually paid off. The announcer's voice boomed again over the speakers, louder and more dramatic this time. "And the winner of today's Pokémon contest is May, from Petalburg City." The crowd erupted into cheers, their applause thunderous and overwhelming. The sound washed over Ash, and for a moment he just stood there, frozen. Max nudged him in the ribs. "Well, don't just stand there, genius. Go, get your ribbon." Ash snapped out of his daze and hurried toward the stage entrance, his boots clicking loudly against the floor. His cheeks burned with a mix of pride and embarrassment as he stepped back onto the stage, the spotlights once again blinding him for a moment. The judges stood in a neat line, each wearing polite but genuinely impressed smiles as they held out the prize, a stunning ribbon, its blue and gold embroidery sparkling under the lights. As Ash approached, he forced himself to channel every ounce of May's bubbly personality. He plastered on her signature smile, all bright and cheerful, and accepted the ribbon with both hands. Holding it up for the audience to see, he called out in his best May impression. "Thank you so much," he said, his voice cheerful and high. "I couldn't have done it without beautifully." The crowd roared in approval, their cheers echoing through the hall like a wave crashing against the shore. Ash glanced at Beautifully, who was fluttering happily beside him, its wings shimmering like a living work of art. He gave the Pokémon a small nod, pride swelling in his chest. As the applause continued, Ash turned back toward the crowd, waving with the ribbon in one hand. He could feel the warmth of the lights on his face, the energy of the audience washing over him. Backstage, Brock and Max watched the scene unfold, both of them smiling, though Max's was as usual tinged with a bit of sarcasm. "Well, I'll admit it," Max said, crossing his arms. "He actually pulled it off. Didn't think he had it in him." Brock chuckled. "Nana do, Tanastina, stay see now. I told you he'd surprise us. He always does. On stage." Ash felt a rush of something he couldn't quite describe. Relief, pride, maybe even joy. He wasn't sure what it was, but as he waved to the cheering crowd, he knew one thing for sure. "Okay," he murmured to Beautifully under his breath, his smile growing wider. "That wasn't so bad after all." Beautifully chirped in agreement, fluttering its wings as if to celebrate their victory. As the announcer moved on to wrap up the event, Ash made his way back toward the curtain, the ribbon still clutched tightly in his hand. Backstage, Brock greeted him with a proud grin, while Max gave him a slow, deliberate clap. "All right," Max said, grinning despite himself. "I'll say it, you didn't totally embarrass yourself." "Congrats, May." Ash rolled his eyes, but he couldn't suppress the grin tugging at his lips. "Thanks, Max. I'll cherish that glowing review forever." Brock laughed. "Well done, Ash. You earned it." As the noise of the crowd faded into the background, Ash looked down at the ribbon in his hands, its shimmering threads catching the light. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. And, for once, he didn't feel like arguing with Max. Backstage, Ash collapsed onto the worn, slightly lumpy couch, his legs giving out beneath him like a jigglypuff after a marathon. The shimmering blue and gold ribbon was still clutched tightly in his hand, the edges slightly crinkled from how hard he'd been gripping it. His chest rose and fell as he tried to catch his breath, the adrenaline finally starting to fade. "I did it," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. "I actually did it." Brock sat down beside him, his expression equal parts pride and amusement. "You were amazing out there, Ash," he said, clapping a supportive hand on his shoulder. "All that practice really paid off." Ash let out a tired laugh, leaning his head back against the couch. "Yeah, well, I think my legs are going to file a formal complaint about those boots. Seriously, how does May wear these without needing a full-time nurse?" Max sauntered over, arms crossed and his ever-present smirk firmly in place. "Yeah, not bad, for a guy in a skirt." Ash groaned, sitting up just enough to grab the nearest pillow and hurl it at Max. "Don't ruin the moment, Max." Max ducked out of the way with ease, the pillow flying harmlessly past him and landing on the floor. "What?" "I'm just saying. You pulled it off. But let's not pretend it wasn't hilarious watching you twirl around like a low punny trying to learn ballet." Ash pointed at him, his face half serious, half exhausted. "One more comment, and you're wearing the skirt next time." Max snorted. "Nanny the piscine, and now hell. Good luck with that." Before Ash could come up with a properly snarky reply, Pikachu leapt onto his lap, nuzzling against his chest with a cheerful pika. Ash smiled, his expression softening as he scratched behind Pikachu's ears. "At least you appreciate me," he said, holding up the ribbon so Pikachu could inspect it. Brock leaned back on the couch, folding his arms with a satisfied sigh. "You know, Ash, I think you might have actually impressed the judges today. They weren't just clapping for beautifully, they were clapping for you." Ash raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, right. Pretty sure they were clapping for beautiful sparkles, and my ability not to trip over myself." "Hey, give yourself some credit," Brock replied, grinning. "You managed to pull off a full routine, hit all the beats, and actually look like you knew what you were doing. That's not easy." Max flopped into a nearby chair, his smirk still intact. "Let's not forget the most impressive part. He didn't fall on his face. I was sure the boots were going to take him out during the spin." "Max," Brock said warningly. Ash rolled his eyes and flopped back against the couch again, letting Pikachu settle on his chest. "You know, I think I deserve a little more than didn't fall on his face. I just won a contest ribbon while pretending to be someone else. That's gotta count for something." "It counts for a lot," Brock said. "May's going to be thrilled when she hears about this. You kept her in the running for the grand festival." At the mention of May, Ash's gaze drifted to the ribbon in his hand. The blue and gold embroidery sparkled under the backstage lights, and for a moment he just stared at it. It wasn't his ribbon, it was May's. But holding it now, he couldn't help but feel a strange mix of pride and responsibility. "This one's for you, May," he murmured softly, his voice barely audible over the hum of the backstage chatter. Max, who had just opened his mouth to make another snarky comment, paused. For once, he didn't say anything, though the smirk didn't completely leave his face. Ash turned the ribbon over in his hands, running his thumb along the smooth, delicate fabric. He thought about all the effort that had gone into this, the endless rehearsals, the ridiculous outfits, the teasing, the nerves, and yes, the boots. He glanced down at Pikachu, who was watching him with bright, trusting eyes. "You know," Ash said, his tone lighter now, "if I ever have to do this again, you're wearing the skirt." Pikachu tilted its head, then let out a playful Pikachu. That sounded suspiciously like laughter. Brock chuckled. "Don't give him ideas, Ash. You'll end up with Pikachu doing your next routine." "Honestly, I think Pikachu would have pulled it off better than me," Ash admitted with a grin. Max leaned back in his chair, kicking his feet up on the table. "Yeah, but then we'd miss the comedy gold of you prancing around in heels. That's entertainment you can't put a price on." Ash groaned again, but this time there was a small, genuine smile tugging at his lips. He held the ribbon up one more time, letting it catch the light. "All right," he said, leaning back and closing his eyes, exhaustion finally catching up to him. "Next time May asks for a favor, remind me to say no." Brock laughed. "Sure, Ash. We'll remind you. But let's be honest, you do it again in a heartbeat." Ash cracked one eye open, his grin widening. "Yeah, probably." The three of them fell into a comfortable silence, the buzz of the contest hall still faintly audible in the background. For all the chaos, the teasing and the nerves, Ash couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. "All right, Max," he said after a moment, his tone teasing. "Your turn. I'll even let you borrow the boots." Max snorted. "Not a chance." "Coward," Ash muttered, a tired laugh escaping him as he closed his eyes again. Pikachu settled deeper into his lap, and for the first time all day, Ash let himself relax.